Hi, everyone. Thank you for that beautiful blessing. I'd like to start my talk by saying, Holy Spirit, I ask you to speak through me to all of these faith-filled women here tonight. Please let me speak words that encourage and enlighten these women and help them to lessen any burdens that they are carrying. Let every word that is uttered here be only for the glory of God.
Amen.
I want to sincerely thank the whole Magnificat team for asking me to be your speaker here tonight. This is the first time I've done anything like this, and I'm humbled at your confidence in me. So thank you very much. Before I begin my talk, I'd like to tell you about a little gift that I brought you from one of the leaders of Magnificat all the way up in Buffalo. I met her this weekend, and she wanted you to have the little booklets that are inside your little bags. They're booklets about praying for the holy souls in purgatory, something we all so need to remember, and oftentimes we forget. Thousands and thousands of souls who need our prayers. So just look at those little books in there. There's also a prayer to St. Gertrude that releases 1,000 souls from purgatory every time you pray it. So think of the great good you can do. And when those souls get to heaven, they'll be praying for you. So a wonderful blessing. Okay, years ago, a friend of mine gave me this little book. Looks like just a little book, nothing special, right? It's called Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence. This book changed my life. It completely changed the way I think. You know, my family all has a very strong devotion to St. Padre Pio. We truly love him. And one of his most famous sayings is, pray, hope, and don't worry, right? Well, my family was quick to remind me that I was very good at the first two, but I was very bad at the third one, okay? The don't worry part, not so good at. I often thought that worry was part of our makeup as women, right? Because we're moms, we're sisters, we're aunts, we're caregivers. We want to help people, we're nurturing. But I came to know that worry has no part in our life at all. As I speak to you today, I want you to only feel positive about yourselves. No comparisons, no jealousy, no judgment. You know that God created you with so much love, and you are each his priceless treasure. There's a song that my daughter Elizabeth wrote that's on her first CD. Her first CD is all songs that she composed herself. And I think that it's a great way to start this talk. So I ask you to just please really pay attention to the words in this song that will make you smile.
There are days when I feel overweight, unlovable, bent out of shape, like nobody will ever look my way. And I feel like my heart's caving in. On those days I feel I'll never win, and I won't cheer up no matter what you say. And I falter and I fail so many times.
I see all those pearls. I see a pearl in each one of you, a precious pearl that God made. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life. I'm going to go back a little, give you some background. I was born in Brooklyn to two loving, faith-filled parents. I have one precious younger sister right over there next to my mom. I was always taught about a loving God, about offering all my sufferings for the souls in purgatory, and about the true presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. What great examples. I can still remember the day of my first communion as one of the very best days of my life. It sounds like a perfect life, but our extended family suffered with mental illness and sexual perversions. But our faith got us through everything, though at times it might have been easier to just give up. We were poor, but I never knew that. I had everything that I wanted. My mom always had a special devotion to our Blessed Mother, and she passed that gift along to me. She prayed for Our Lady to find me the perfect husband, and that prayer was more than answered right there. I met my Tim on 8/4/84, 34 years ago, and I met him at a prayer group in Floral Park. He came with a lovely young woman, Ronnie, who I had recently met at a parish prayer group in St. Gregory the Great in Belrose. During fellowship that night, I told Ronnie, "Oh, your boyfriend seems so nice." And she said, "What? He's not my boyfriend. He's like my brother. I've known him my whole life." Well, that made me happy when I heard that. The good news, that was the good news for me. And then 30 years ago, Tim and I were married at Our Lady of Fatima Parish in Jackson Heights under a gigantic mosaic of Our Lady of Fatima. What a beautiful way to begin a marriage. It's so important to look at your life in a positive way as much as you can, and to see all of the little God incidences in your life that adds up to the story of your life. My dear friend Lisa Reale taught me how to do that. The world teaches us that there are coincidences every day in our life, but we know better as Catholic women. If we believe that God's divine providence has control of our lives, we'll never see coincidence again. Only God incidents. More on that later. Before Tim and I were married, this is all, now I'm going to tell you all about God incidences in our life and things that angels were around us. Before Tim and I was married, he complained about not loving his job. So I encouraged him to prepare a resume and just put it out to see what would happen. I even offered to prepare the resume for him. So we wrote the resume, and then one night at our prayer group at St. Gregory's, Tim shared his frustration with his job with the group. There was a young man there. He had never attended the prayer group before, and he asked for Tim's resume. He said, "I would like to pass it on to someone that I know." Tim got that job from that person he passed it to. He's still in that job. He's been working there for 32 years. And we never, ever saw that young man again. That was the only time we ever saw him. In addition to that, Tim's immediate boss became our Elizabeth's godmother. And she was a tremendous support to our family as our kids were growing. She was just so wonderful to us, an angel sent to us. So there's angels watching over us all the time. And my kids say, I must tell you the engagement story. So after Tim and I met and everything was so great, we went on our first date to Shea Stadium. When we left the game and were walking out, I said to Tim, "Who won?" And he said, "I don't know." Because we were too busy talking the whole night. We had not watched 1 second of the game. But after that, Tim decided that I probably wasn't the right person for him. So we just became friends again. And this went back and forth several times. We're friends, we're dating, we're friends, we're dating. Okay, now my dad and my dear friend Helen step in and they say, "Listen, you gotta make this guy jealous. He's ridiculous, on and off, on and off. Just start going out with somebody else and make him jealous and tell him how much you like the other guy." I said, I cannot do it. I don't like playing games. I don't like that kind of stuff. I can't do it. And they're like, no, if you do it, it will wake him up. Nope, I can't do it. So I didn't do it, all right? But I did find someone else, and we started to date, and he started to get very serious very quickly. He would buy me roses constantly, jewelry, diamond necklaces, diamond rings, like constantly, like really, really fast and really in love. Elizabeth said that I must tell you that his job was driving the truck for Wise potato chips. She thinks that's hilarious. And his name was Steve Cannoli. What a name, right? But so I went from an Italian boyfriend to a nice Irish husband. But what happened with that was, it was New Year's Day. And on New Year's Day, I was off from work, and so was Tim. But my boyfriend had to work. So he said, tonight I'm going to come out and I'm going to bring you for a special dinner. Because it was, I can't even remember, a 2-month or 3-month or something like that anniversary of us going out together. So I said, okay. So I'm home on New Year's Day, and Tim calls. And he says, can I come over for a little while? I said, yeah, sure, I'm going out tonight, but I'm free during the day. So he comes, and he's sitting next to me on the couch, and we're chatting, and then, because we were very good friends. And then he starts saying something. And in my mind, this is what I say. Here we go again. He's gonna now say, I wanna date you again, and then he's gonna ditch me again. And I'm really, and all of this is going in my head. I'm really tired of this. And as this is going in my head, he's talking. He's saying the whole thing. But I can't hear him, because I'm going through all of this in my head. When I stop going through in my head, this is what I hear. So I guess what I'm saying is, will you marry me? And I said, what? Say that again? And he said it again, and I couldn't believe it. And I said yes. So now my boyfriend's coming over to bring me out for my anniversary. And I had to tell him that I was engaged to Tim. That was not a fun time. And what happened after that is all of our friends knew that I was going out with this guy, Steve, and how serious he was. So Tim had decided that when we announced to people that we were engaged, that I should just say, I got engaged. And then they would all think it was Steve, which they did. So they all went like this, oh, good. And like Tim was in the background, and then I said, I'm engaged to Tim. And then we heard, everybody was so happy, and it was a big celebration. So God brought me through that crazy journey too. Years later, I became pregnant with our son Christopher, and I found I had gestational diabetes. I tested my blood 8 times a day, and I did everything I could to have a healthy baby. I went into labor on the day before Thanksgiving, 1989, and Christopher was born the day after Thanksgiving. At 3 o'clock, the hour of divine mercy. So I was in labor for 50 hours when the doctor told me, we don't think you can deliver this baby naturally because his head is too big. Thank you to my Irish husband with the big head, okay? So I said, please give me a chance. I want to have him naturally. And he said, okay, I'll watch you push. But he wasn't hopeful at all. Well, after the first push, he turned to the nurses and he said, I think she can do this. So after 2.5 hours of pushing, 52.5 hours altogether, our beautiful Christopher was born. He was born. We had broth for Thanksgiving that year, clear broth, because that's all you could have. That was our Thanksgiving dinner. But clear broth and 52 hours of labor worth every second for the precious gift we got in our Christopher. And we'll skip ahead 3 years. 3 years later, I became pregnant with Elizabeth, and the gestational diabetes was worse, because that's the way it goes. Gets worse with each child. So now I was told I would have to give myself insulin shots every day. I remember the horror when I saw those long needles as the nurse was trying to teach me how to do this. I was always very, very fearful of needles, and I thought, I can't do it. But it was either do that or lose the baby. So when your baby's life is on the line, you put all your fears aside. All during her pregnancy, I was really sick. No morning sickness. It was all day sickness, and it was all pregnancy sickness. It was everywhere. I could never go anywhere without a plastic bag. It was not good. I had to monitor the baby's movement, and during each certain amount of time, if the baby didn't move, I would have to rush to the hospital and have more tests. Eventually, I had to be confined to bed rest. The doctors were very clear in letting me know that the baby might not survive, and if the baby was born, she would be in intensive care for quite some time. But we just kept praying. When I was confined to bed rest, my angel mom came to live with us from Monday to Friday to care for me and Christopher, and then went home to care for my dad on the weekend. So she was another very big angel in our lives. On January 28, 1993, I went into labor. And after hours, all of a sudden, the room that you normally hear like this, the room became very quiet. And the doctors and nurses flooded into the room. The baby's heart had stopped. They said they had to do an emergency C-section. I just wanted my baby to be okay. Our doctor knew the sex of the baby, but we wanted to be surprised, so we didn't know it. But we were really hoping for a girl, and we felt like it was going to be a girl. At delivery, the resident doctor announces, "It's a boy." And Tim and I look at one another, really in shock, because we really thought she was going to be a girl. And then my doctor kind of hit him and said, "It's not a boy, it's a girl." We were incredibly thrilled, and we found out later that the resident said that when he looked at the baby's face, he thought it was a boy. We thought he needed a little more training as a doctor. I held Elizabeth for just a moment, and she was rushed to the NICU, as they had told us she would be. She looked a little bit like Yoda. And for a moment, both Tim and I thought she would have it so hard being a girl and looking like that. Because previously, when Christopher was born, he had been named the most beautiful baby in the nursery. Perfect and gorgeous, which my mother told me, and I didn't believe, till I walked down to the nursery myself and saw that everyone was saying he was the most beautiful baby. We were saying, "Oh no, and she's the girl, and she looks like Yoda." Well, amazingly, 15 to 30 minutes later, Elizabeth was released from the NICU. She was fine. And shortly after, she became transformed. Her complexion turned to peaches and cream. No more Yoda. She looked just beautiful. She was a beautiful little girl. Afterward, though, the doctors warned us. So we have, always there's the bad and there's the good. They come together all the time. So afterwards, after that beautiful birth out of NICU so quickly, the doctors warned us that we shouldn't have any more children. They said that Tim and I had planned on having at least 4 children. So the news for us was very devastating. But they said we could most certainly lose the next baby, but in the process, there was a very great chance that Tim and the kids would also lose me. We had been using natural family planning since the beginning of our marriage, but now we really prayed about what we should do. We talked to some priest. We really did everything we could. The priest advised us to go on birth control and not use the natural family planning. But through all of our prayer, we decided to stick with natural family planning and put our trust in God and let Him take care of it. So, as it turned out, God gave us only 2 children, but He gave us the blessing of more than 10 children in those 2 children. So we learned, once again, God's plan doesn't always coincide with our plan. This was living proof that at the very early stages of our marriage, we had to think about that trustful surrender to God's divine providence. We mindfully named our children after great saints, so they would always have models to look up to. Christopher's name means Christ bearer, as we always wanted him to carry Christ in his heart. His middle name is Michael, after the great Saint Michael the Archangel, the great defender of us in life's battles against Satan. Elizabeth Ann was named after the great Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton. She was a wonderful wife and mother, with a very deep devotion to the Eucharist, to sacred scripture, and to the Virgin Mary. She was very well known for embracing God's will, which she called the will. She established the first free Catholic school in America, and Elizabeth started her career as a Catholic school teacher. But then I think back to when I was in first grade at Ascension Catholic School in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. And when you walked into the school, you walked up a big staircase, and at the top of the staircase, there was a bust of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. And I loved it. I didn't really know why I loved it, but every time I walked in, I loved seeing that. And I learned the story of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton and loved her all those years, never knowing that as I looked at her every day then, so many years later, she would have such an impact on my life and on the life of my daughter by having that beautiful name and that beautiful patron saint. Every single night, we would pray over the cribs of our children, and we would also pray over my belly when I was pregnant. And as the kids began to talk, Tim and I were completely astounded that they knew all their prayers. And we were like, how do they know them? Until we realized that by us saying those prayers over their crib every night, even before they could talk, they were hearing them. They were hearing the Our Father, the Hail Mary. So by the time they knew how to talk, they were able to say those prayers with them. They knew them. That practice was totally inspired by the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit told us to do that. And I encourage all of you to pick up that practice with your children, with your grandchildren, with maybe nieces and nephews. It's just a great gift to the children. And it reaps very great rewards. So, as many of you know, I always say that I married my Prince Charming. But there's no marriage without some trials. And this is a story that I love because I feel, again, it was inspired by God. After Elizabeth was born, she cried almost constantly from the time she was born in January until Easter. So it was a long time. And I remember one night when Elizabeth was only a few months old and Tim came home from work and I had just had it. And I said, please take this baby. All right, so we've all had those moments. So he took her and I said, I just need a break. So then Tim, in his good, helpful way, tried to suggest all the things that I could have done to make my life easier. You know, all the things I could have done to help myself, right? Men are the fixer-uppers, right? Well, I wanted to scream at him and say, don't you think I tried every one of those things in these past months? But instead, I said one of my favorite lines, Holy Spirit, help me. And the Holy Spirit told me to instead say this, and I really couldn't even believe it as it was coming out of my mouth. I said, Tim, do you know what I want you to say to me when you hear something like that? I want you to say, poor Margie, can I get you a cup of tea? And he just went, oh, okay. Can I get you a cup of tea? And I said, yes, you can. Well, about a week later, something similar happened, and I heard Tim start to give me the advice. He immediately caught himself, and he said, poor Margie, can I get you a cup of tea? And it went like that for the rest of our marriage. He had gotten the message. I was able to express it to him, and he was able to really receive it and listen to it. And it made our marriage so much stronger because we really could give to one another not 50-50, but 100-100, which is what a marriage has to be. Okay, now something that's not related to anything, but my family's favorite story, and they told me that I had to tell it. When we were first married, we were living in Stanford Court, a condominium community in Montauk, and we were at the point of selling it. And we had it listed with a real estate. Chris was a baby, and one day the doorbell rang, and there was this man outside, and I opened the door, and he said, hello, I want to see your house. And I said, oh, you have to call the real estate. And he said, no, please, I'm old, and my wife is right in the car. Can't you please let me see the house? And I said, no, I have a baby. I can't let you in my house. And he said, please look at me. I'm old. I'm homeless. Sophie, wave to the lady. Wave to the lady. And Sophie's in the car like this, waving to me, right? So I said, okay, come on in. So they come in and they're walking around and they're looking at the house and like, oh, this is really nice. And I'm thinking, all right, maybe this was God. Maybe these people are going to buy the house. So I bring them upstairs to see the bedrooms, and they're walking around the bedroom and looking at everything. And then the lady says to me, Sophie, she says to me, your husband, he's so handsome. So I look around and I'm thinking, we're in our bedroom, but there's no picture of my husband in our bedroom. And I'm thinking, who is she looking at? So I said, where did you see the picture of my husband? I'm thinking maybe she's delayed from seeing the wedding picture downstairs. And she says, right there on the wall. And her husband says, Sophie, that's not the woman's husband, that's Jesus Christ. There was a picture of Jesus on the wall, not Tim. We teased him for many years about that. Okay. Now going back down into some sad news. In the year 2000, tragedy struck our family. While on vacation in the mountains of Virginia, I became very sick. I was rushed to the hospital by Tim and the kids in the middle of the night. Chris was only 10 years old and Elizabeth only 7. After what seemed like a million tests, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And to make matters worse, the kids developed severe bronchitis, so Tim had to tend to them with what they say is a vivid memory, taking Vicks cough medicine. They said they can still, see the faces? They can still remember it to this day. And they had to move from the timeshare we were in to a small little motel room, so they were very uncomfortable. They were coughing. I was in the hospital so extremely sick. We didn't know when I was ever going to be able to get out of the hospital, so Tim drove the kids home from Virginia to my parents so that they could stay with them. And then he came back by plane to Washington, D.C., and then drove from Washington, D.C. to Virginia, where I was to be back with me. Finally, there was a lovely young woman doctor, and she told us that I had an abscess on my intestines and it was leaking poison into my system. She put a drain in, but she encouraged us to go to a better hospital. It was a beautiful hospital and the people were so kind, but there were no specialists. There were only general doctors. She said, you have to get out of here if you want to live. So I was rushed by ambulance, which I didn't realize that being in the back of an ambulance is the same as being in the back of a U-Haul truck. There are no shock absorbers, and I have a drain in my back, and I'm bumping like this on the probably about 7.5-hour journey from there to Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. The trip was excruciating, and I had to have major surgery to have the abscess removed from my intestines and have them reattached. After the surgery, I was supposed to be better. I became even sicker. My intestines were once again leaking poison into my system. They broke at the spot where they did the surgery. So one night, I was sitting on my bed in the room in Mount Sinai. I had a private nurse at my side from Haiti. She was so lovely. Tim had hired her to stay with me. And I was so sick. And I really felt, this is it. I'm going to die. I just felt it. And she said to me, would it be okay if I pray with you? And I said, I would love that. And she started praying with me. And as we sat on the side of the bed and we faced the big window, this wall was at the foot of my bed. And so many people had sent me mass cards, because I was in the hospital for more than a month at that time, and in Virginia, and then I block out a lot of the story. Tim has to help me with it. And then even longer, it was probably more than a month that I didn't even eat anything at all. I had to have PICUs in. It was really terrible. But at that moment, when I really felt I was dying, I turned and I looked at the foot of my bed where Tim had put every mass card that people had sent me. So the whole wall was full of mass cards. And we were in a dark room with no lights on. And I turned and I looked at the mass cards, and every holy picture on those mass cards was glowing. Every one. And I knew that I was going to be okay. I just stayed calm. and they rushed in to get me to do another emergency surgery, and this time they had to put on a temporary bag until my intestines healed, which to me was probably one of the worst things in the world. But I had to do it. I had to live with that for many months and then go back for another surgery to reattach everything. Again, devastating, a devastating time in my life. Yet God gave me signs of so much hope along the way. My community in Wantor jumped in to help me and my family and all the members of our church. Meals were delivered to our door every single night for many, many months. They were all delivered, but they were delicious, but they were delivered also with lots and lots of love. That's when our Elizabeth, who at that time would only eat vegetables and fruit and absolutely nothing else, she learned to eat things because I said to her, what comes is what we're eating, because that's the only choice we have. And that's when she developed her love of tacos, which she loves to this day. My children were chauffeured everywhere by all of our loving members of our community. They were brought on countless play dates. And one day I remember Chris telling me that he didn't know why people said New Yorkers are so mean. He said, why would they say that when all of these people are so loving to all of us? At the very last surgery, as I was being wheeled to the operating room, I grabbed the doctor's hand and I told him, I have 2 small children at home, and I have to be okay for them. I asked him to picture me as his daughter on the operating table and make me well again. He started to cry, and with those tears in his eyes, he assured me I would be his daughter on that table. It was such an incredibly difficult time for our family, but we learned so much from it. God never lets any experience go to waste. We learn that every day is so precious, that family and friends are so vital, that we are stronger than we think, and that God is always watching over us. When we suffer, we share in the passion of Christ. Nothing happens to us without God's wish or his permission. Not even a hair falls from our head without his consent. Our job is to accept our sufferings and offer them in union with his sufferings. Then we reap the greatest rewards. This is the easiest penance. It brings us less purgatory and more graces and blessings than we can imagine. The saints even teach us that if we patiently bear our sufferings, we merit the crown of martyrdom because we bear them for the love of Jesus. God could have easily saved us from all suffering, but he doesn't, because he knows in his infinite goodness what that suffering will do for us. Only he knows what great good can come from our suffering. God gives us the strength to bear our suffering, but we just need to ask him for the help to bear it. Sit down and have a conversation with God. He knows what you need, but as he said to St. Faustina, he likes to hear it from your lips. We should pray with our whole heart all the time, asking God to help us suffer, to console us, or to deliver us from suffering. The true secret of happiness, though, is to accept your suffering for the love of God with serenity and peace. Our family was very, very devoted to our parish of St. Francis de Chantal. We worked in countless ministries there and loved serving our church and the people of God. We knew and loved everyone in our parish. In 2012, we left that parish and all of our ministries there. Again, a devastating time. I feel like I cried for almost 3 years until we began to serve in new ministries outside of that parish. I wish I knew then what I knew now. I wouldn't have cried those 3 years. We can now see why we were pulled out of that parish, because God had different plans for us. While we were there, we were so busy helping everyone in the parish and ministering to all of them that we were not furthering our own spirituality and developing our spirituality. Our faith has changed so much since that time, and since the time we first married until now. We've learned and experienced so much. When our ministry was forced to change again recently from working with the missionaries of the Most Holy Eucharist, we were very, very devastated once again, but we were so much better equipped to handle it. It still hurt tremendously, but we bounced back so much quicker, knowing that God always knows what's best and lovingly directs our paths. Our children's paths have gone the same way. They learned, thankfully, at a much younger age than Tim and I did about trustful surrender to God's divine providence. Christopher knew from a very young age that he wanted to be a priest. Upon graduating high school, he entered the college seminary in Douglaston to become a diocesan priest. It wasn't the right fit for him. God pointed it out in a very harsh way, and Chris was broken. Chris stayed in his room, sad all the time, which anyone who knows Christopher knows it's completely unlike him because he never stopped smiling. Finally, God brought him through that time, and he began to try to rebuild his life. He worked on his philosophy degree with every intention of entering the seminary in Dunwoody and once again being a diocesan priest. But once again, that dream was dashed in a very, very harsh way. Then, one day, it was suggested to him, let me say this first. It had been suggested to him by friends and family that he should check out some orders. But Christopher didn't really know anything about orders. All he had really known in his life were the diocesan priests that helped to form his faith. One day, 3 different people, at 3 different times in that same day, said to Chris, "We really think you should check out the Capuchins," which is the order of St. Padre Pio. Christopher had never really thought of exploring anything like that, but he said, because those 3 people said it on the same day, I'm going to take that as a sign from God, and I'm going to just call and see if they have anything upcoming. So the orders have a thing called a come and see, where you go and you live with them for the weekend, and you get to see what their order is like. So he called the Capuchins to see if they had a come and see, and they said, yes, we have one coming up, and we would love for you to come. So he was whisked right into it, and he went, and when he was going to go, he was going to Boston, I asked him, are you nervous? And Christopher really is very trustful, so he's not usually nervous about anything. And he said, I kind of am, because I really don't know at all what to expect. And I said to him, just say, Holy Spirit, help me, you're going to be okay. When he got there, and he nervously went to the door to ring the bell, the priest opened the door, and he said that what he felt was a tremendous wave of peace come over him. And he felt the words in his heart, you're home. He called us later that weekend and he said, I would never want you to feel bad, but I have to tell you that if I could just stay here and not come home, I would. This is the place for me. What a tremendous blessing for our family. He knew then that that life was a much better fit for him, the life of the Capuchins. Not to mention that our family is so devoted to St. Padre Pio, so that was just an extra special part of it. The Capuchins are a branch of the Franciscans, and Christopher has always had many of the charisms of St. Francis. He even chose Francis as his confirmation name. So God had the plan from way back then. He knew it was going to happen, even though we didn't. Chris had to learn to be patient, watch for God's signs, and completely trust in God's plan for his life. On our Blessed Mother's birthday this year, the director of vocations of the Capuchins told Christopher that he was officially named a candidate for the Capuchins. So God willing, Christopher will enter the Capuchins this summer. So keep him in your prayers, everyone. Now for our Elizabeth. As Elizabeth started her senior year in college, she wondered if she was on the correct path. She was studying music, which was her great passion, so she knew that that part was right. But she was also majoring in education for the idea of having a job. At that time, Tim and I began a 30-day novena to St. Joseph for her. Many people had come to us and said, pray the novena to St. Joseph. One of them being Lisa Reale's daughter, Luciana. She said, pray the novena to St. Joseph for a husband for Elizabeth, and you'll get a great husband for her. So that's what we were going to do. And then right as we were going to start the novena, Tim said, you know what? I'm not praying for the husband, because she doesn't need the husband yet. She's just still in college. I'm praying that God sends her the perfect job. So that's what he did. He prayed that novena for 30 days, that she would get the exact perfect job for her. On the 30th day of the novena, Elizabeth was asked by a local pastor to come and meet with him. And she had known this pastor for many years. He had been a chaplain at Holy Trinity, where they went to high school. And she believed he was going to ask her to lead the young adult choir and do the young adult mass at that parish, because he had asked her that before. And she told me, I'm going to have to turn him down, because I have to see what kind of a job I'm going to get first when I graduate before I can commit to that. To her complete surprise, Father explained to her that they had created a position for her in Holy Family Catholic School as a music and religion teacher, and that she would also be the music minister for all the school masses, as well as the choir director for the youth and the children's choirs. She had gotten a job even before she graduated, and without even asking for it. Elizabeth worked there for 3 years, reaping all the blessings of her experiences there that would go with her throughout her life and help her with the rest of her life. However, she started to feel that it was time for a change. Amazingly, another pastor expressed to his friend, who was Elizabeth's godfather, that he was in search for a new parish music director. Elizabeth had always shied away from that position, since she couldn't play the organ well. To our delight, we found out that this job came with a full-time organist, which is basically unheard of. Elizabeth met with the pastor and was immediately hired as the parish's music director and liturgical minister. Until they can get a replacement for her at school, because she would never leave without first warning everyone, she worked 2 full-time jobs. So once again, St. Joseph came through, and on St. Joseph's Day, his feast day, Elizabeth found out that that day a replacement had been found for her at school. And on the Monday of Holy Week, the busiest week for that position, Elizabeth was able to devote her time full-time to that new position. She absolutely loves where God has called her now, and she's always open to new possibilities. Again, Elizabeth took that leap of faith and just jumped blindly into this. The part that I forgot to write here is that Elizabeth had told her principal that she was planning on leaving at the end of the year. And Elizabeth is a person who has everything in order, never varies, really plans everything. And she felt shocked herself that she was telling the principal, I'm leaving, when she didn't have another job. But she felt strongly that she should do it and give the principal warning so that she could get a new teacher. And she went to her women's prayer group that week, and she told them that she did that. And they all know her, so they were out of their mind shocked. They said, why would you do that when you don't have another job? And she said, I just know the right thing is going to happen. And that's what happened. Again, exhibiting that trustful surrender to God's divine providence. The gospel this past Sunday was about the blind man Bartimaeus. There's so many kinds of blindness, and we all have the cloak, like Bartimaeus had, a cloak of some kind. We all carry something with us or within us that we cling to, that's part of our identity, that brings us comfort, that's hard to imagine our lives without. For us, it might have been our ministries at our different parishes and different things we did. Or it might have been the fact that we wanted more children. When Bartimaeus threw off his cloak, he embraced the new life he knew Jesus could give him. He knew that the security and comfort and usefulness of his cloak would be replaced by something much bigger. Bartimaeus never went back to get his cloak. He demonstrated trustful surrender. He never returned to its familiarity. He just followed Jesus. Now, in the past few years, my family and I have been working and volunteering for the Rosa Mystica Foundation. Our Lady has definitely led us there. For anyone who doesn't know about it, it's a house of prayer in upstate New York dedicated to Our Lady of Rosa Mystica. It's a peaceful and very holy place where you can grow closer to Jesus through his Blessed Mother. For those who can't make the trip all the way there, it's about 3.5 hours away, we have a prayer group every month, the first Tuesday of every month, right in Muttontown, right in Long Island, and there you can still receive those same graces that our Blessed Mother wants to give to us. When I threw down my cloak, like Bartimaeus, and I just followed, that's where I was led. I was led to Rosa Mystica. Our family so loves to do ministry together. That's one of our favorite things to do. And in Rosa Mystica, we found a place where we could do that. We lead retreats there as a family several times a year, and we help to run the prayer group in Muttontown, and Woods Worship does the music for us there, and it has brought us so many countless blessings. Let's never forget our Blessed Mother at the very end of my talk. When we are in pain, we should pray to Our Lady of Sorrows to help us. She experienced oceans of sorrow during our Lord's Passion. She was given the graces by God to be our most perfect and loving mother. She loves us with a mother's heart, and she brings all of our petitions to her Son because she only wants the best for us, like all mothers do. We should always run to her with complete confidence. When we led our last retreat before I say this, let me just say one other thing, because this is the very end. Recently, we were on a wonderful weekend, and we met a fantastic priest that said specifically to me, you must pray the Novena of Surrender. I encourage you all to look it up. Google it, the Novena of Surrender. It was written by Don Dolindo, who was one of St. Padre Pio's spiritual advisors. And it is so beautiful. I felt when I got it that it was something that I should share with my daughter, and we started to say it together. And we are so in love with it that after the 9-day novena, we just keep on saying it over and over again. And one of the lines you say at the end of the novena every day, it's a little small prayer every day, we say, "Oh Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything." And he will. When we led our last retreat at Rosa Mystica, we give out quotes from saints or from the Bible, and we hold them face down, and we let everyone pick one. And then we tell them that that's a quote for you to pray about the whole weekend. It's a quote specifically for you. God chooses it because you don't know which one you're going to choose. And on our last retreat, when Elizabeth chose her quote, she was standing next to me, and she gasped when she chose it. And I said, "Why are you gasping?" And she said, "This is my quote. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." That's Jeremiah 29:11. She's told me that that quote was the beginning of a song she was writing, but she had only written the beginning of it. That night, we had nocturnal adoration all night long. And there were 2 hours in the middle of the night that weren't taken by anyone. And Elizabeth said, "I'll go for those 2 hours." And I said, "I don't know if I want you to go alone in the middle of the night." And she said, No, I'm going for those 2 hours. So she went. And in those 2 hours, she wound up completing that song. The quote she got on that weekend of a song that she had started writing a long time ago. And in those 2 hours with Jesus, alone in the middle of the night, she completed this song. And I think as an end to my talk, I would like you to close your eyes and listen to this song as Elizabeth sings it, because I think it perfectly sums up trustful surrender to God's divine providence. God bless you all.